and stopping outsourcing across the country. And as the president is coming up this week to his first 100 days, he's made a lot of promises to the people that I represent in Michigan and that my colleagues represent in their states as well, in terms of setting the stage to create jobs, being able to stop outsourcing that hurts middle class and working families. But as my mother always said, actions speak louder than words. Studies aren't enough. Talking about something is not enough. People in Michigan want good-paying jobs, and they want to know that we're actually focused on those things that are going to bring jobs back to America. President Trump said he would hold countries like China accountable when they manipulate their currency. In fact, he said he would do that on day one. Well, we're now close to day 100, and he has not yet fulfilled that promise. We know that there are about 5 million American jobs that have been lost as a result of currency manipulation, and people in Michigan want to have that stopped, and they want us to be tough with China and call them out for what we know that they have been doing over the years. He said he would stop companies from outsourcing American jobs, like the 3 to 4 million manufacturing jobs that are now overseas and represent a huge missed opportunity for our economy and to create jobs here at home. He said he would be on the side of working people by supporting the policy of Buy American, Hire American, but we know that studies are not enough. Studies are not enough. We need to be serious and be bold and have actions that will actually create jobs here, making products here. So as we approach the first 100 days of Donald Trump's presidency, my constituents in Michigan and hardworking Americans across the country have yet to see specific deliverables, actions regarding his promises on jobs, outsourcing, and trade. As I mentioned, he refused to label China a currency manipulator, but somehow his companies did have time to make a deal with China to create 38 trademarks for new Donald J. Trump businesses in China, and his family has done the same. He allowed oil companies to build the Keystone Pipeline and the Dakota Access Pipeline using foreign steel, not American steel, even though he said those pipelines were going to be built with American steel. And he's made no effort to reach out with us to pass bills like Senator Donnelly's End Outsourcing Act or my Bring Jobs Home Act as well. So we're here to say we want to work with this president if he's serious. Over the last 2 weeks, I traveled around Michigan to announce a 3-part jobs agenda that we care about in Michigan to ensure that we're making products in America, that we're closing loopholes that are sending jobs overseas, and holding countries like China accountable for unfair trade practices. And I want to commend Senator Baldwin for leading the effort as it relates to Buy America and using iron and steel, American iron and steel, in our products. There's so much that we can do. We know specifically that in the last 5 years, $70 billion in foreign products have been purchased with American tax dollars. That can end with Senator Baldwin's leadership by also passing my Make It in America Act. So if President Trump and Republicans are serious about keeping their promises to the American people, our constituents who want us to work together and create the opportunity for good-paying jobs, then we're ready to do that. In fact, we have the ideas and the bills. It's time to act, not just talk. And after 100 days, I hope that he'll join with us and start acting. I want to now introduce Congressman David Cicilline from Rhode Island.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator. I represent the 1st Congressional District of Rhode Island, and I'm co-chair of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. My home state is the birthplace of the American Industrial Revolution, which started at Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And as the Industrial Revolution spread, it gave economic empowerment to millions of working people. And in particular, families supporting jobs in manufacturing built our nation's middle class throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. That was true for shipbuilders and textile workers in Rhode Island, steel workers in Buffalo, automakers in Detroit, and other cities and towns all across our country. These jobs offered good wages, honest work, and they helped millions of working people support their families, buy a home, send their kids to school, and save for their retirement. But over the past few decades, our manufacturing sector has been devastated by bad trade deals and a tax code that rewards companies for shipping jobs overseas. And it's long past time that Washington stop undermining the manufacturing sector, and it's long past time for us to stand up for working people. And to put it simply, if we want to fully rebuild our economy, we need to strengthen American manufacturing and start making things again in America. That's exactly what Donald Trump said he would do during the presidential campaign. In December 2015, only weeks before the Iowa caucuses, he said, "We're going to have jobs again. Believe me, we're going to have manufacturing again." And just last February, he pledged that his administration will return significant manufacturing jobs to our country. But this is just another broken promise. During his first 100 days in office, President Trump has failed to use American steel for the Keystone Pipeline, as Senator Stabenow mentioned, proposed $2.5 billion in cuts in the Labor Department, which will reduce funding for critical job training in advanced manufacturing, and proposed the complete elimination of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, a federal initiative that provides critical matching grants to support regional manufacturing economies. Mr. President, actions speak louder than words, and your actions make clear that you're just not interested in making things in America again. Rather than keep his promise to help create good manufacturing jobs, the president has instead continued to focus on divisive issues that appeal only to a very narrow segment of his own political party. He's trying to repeal Obamacare, trying to impose a Muslim ban, and tomorrow he's planning to propose more tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. But as we close in on the first 100 days of the Trump presidency, he's offered nothing but broken promises for working people. Nearly 100 days in, and the president still has no plan to revitalize American manufacturing. If Donald Trump were serious about putting working people first, he'd work with Democrats to pass bills we've already introduced to strengthen manufacturing. He'd work with Whip Hoyer to pass parts of the Make It in America agenda. He'd work with me to pass the Make It in America Manufacturing Communities Act that I introduced with Senator Gillibrand. Or he'd work with Senator Murphy, Senator Baldwin, and I to modernize Buy America provisions. Or he'd sit down with Democrats in both chambers to improve job training services for folks who want to work in advanced manufacturing. But that's not what Donald Trump is doing. His policies are weakening American manufacturing, not strengthening it. In the past 100 days, if we've learned anything, is that this administration cannot govern solely by signing executive orders or passing bills with only Republican votes. If Donald Trump wants to keep the promises he's made to working people, then he needs to start working with Democrats to deliver results. We're ready to go. We've introduced bills to get American manufacturing moving again, and all we need now is a real partner in the White House who's more concerned with results and less concerned with politics. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce the distinguished senator from Pennsylvania, Senator Casey.
I want to thank both Senate and House colleagues for this opportunity. I want to thank you for being here. It's been 100 days, but promises not kept, promises not fulfilled. I'll only focus on three. There are lots more. The three I'll focus on are first and foremost infrastructure, also talk about NAFTA as well as coal miners. When it comes to infrastructure, just days after the president's inauguration, Democrats put forth a detailed proposal to create 15 million jobs by virtue of an unprecedented investment in infrastructure. There was specific dollar amounts in that plan. Roads and bridges, for example, $210 billion by way of example. And when I go across Pennsylvania, as I did for the break we had in February, we're on the road in February, and the last 2 weeks in Pennsylvania, wherever I went, whatever county I was in, even very small population counties, rural counties, when you mention the number of structurally deficient bridges in that county, sometimes a small county with 50 or 75 or 100 or more structurally deficient bridges, people want action on those bridges and on those areas of infrastructure. In my state, 20% of the bridges are structurally deficient. More than 4,506 at last count structurally deficient bridges. Across the country, the numbers go higher than 55,000. But it's more than roads and bridges. It's water systems, sewer systems, some of which haven't been invested in years. Broadband is an issue that arises in many parts of Pennsylvania. We know that in rural Pennsylvania, according to the FCC, 20% of rural Pennsylvania doesn't have access to high-speed internet. And that 20% in many rural counties is 66%, as it is in Susquehanna County. I think it's 69% in Sullivan County, both in northeastern Pennsylvania. The same is true in the central part of the state in the southwest. It's bad enough for small businesses not able to grow and expand because they don't have broadband. Maybe it's even worse when kids in schools cannot do their homework because they don't have access to high-speed internet. How about roads? By one estimate, in terms of the impact on individual motorists in Pennsylvania, more than $600 I should say, is spent per motorist in a state like ours because of the condition of the roads. No state in America can make the investment in infrastructure that is necessary and that I think our taxpayers have a right to expect. We can't do that alone. No state has that capacity. This has to be a national effort that President Trump talked a lot about on the campaign trail and hasn't said much of anything. And even if he said a few things along the way, where is the plan? Where is the plan to respond to embrace, to criticize, or to do something about the proposal that Democrats had way back in January? How about trade? The president came into states like Pennsylvania and talked a lot about trade. I was glad he was raising that issue. I was glad that he talked about renegotiating NAFTA. Where's the plan for that? We haven't seen a plan for that. And finally, and maybe this is the most egregious of all because he wouldn't have to do much, the United States Senate last year came together in a bipartisan fashion, at least in the Finance Committee, and got the Minors Protection Act passed to finally keep our promise to minors with regard to their health care and their pensions. We were told by the Republican leadership that if we got it through the Finance Committee, we would be able to have a vote on the floor. That never happened. That was a Republican failure, 100% in late 2016. Now we're approaching another deadline. Now we have the opportunity to at least get the health care part of that done in a permanent fashion. What have we heard from President Trump? Many of us have asked for his support on this. Many of us have actually written to him, even days or weeks after the election. In this instance, because there is a bill, it is paid for, and it is bipartisan support, the only thing that President Trump has to do is to make two or maybe just one phone call. And I think he has to use about 8 words. All he'd have to do is make one phone call with 2 people on the phone and say, Mitch and Paul, get the minors' bill done, and hang up the phone. That's all he has to do. It would not even take him 30 seconds to urge the 2 leaders. But I haven't seen any evidence that he's been advocating on behalf of retired coal miners. And that is, I think, the most egregious of all, because he doesn't have to go on the road. He doesn't have to introduce a bill. He doesn't have to do anything other than urge the 2 Republican leaders who are in charge of both houses to get this done for coal miners. So I don't think what we're asking for is in any way unreasonable on the 3 issues I raised or the issues that were raised by my colleagues. So we need to see a president who's going to at least begin to work on fulfilling commitments, at least begin to work on keeping his promises. Representative Beyer.
Thank you, Senator, very much. Good morning. I might suggest to Senator Casey maybe President Trump could just tweet that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a good
It'd
idea.
be even shorter. Like I built a small, successful family business over the last 40 years just across the river. And I know what small businesses need. I know what working families need. I've seen nothing in this first 100 days that moves us in the direction of job creation. I didn't support President Trump But like all of my colleagues, when he won, I said, I want him to succeed. We love our country, and we'll work with him if he comes to us with sensible ideas to help this country create jobs. Instead, he spent the first 100 days trying to cut taxes for the wealthy, trying to take health care away from 24 million Americans. He hasn't focused on creating the jobs of today or tomorrow. He's trying to force our country and our economy backwards. He's taken actions to hurt jobs in growing sectors like the tech industry and clean energy through cuts to science, research, development, misguided cuts to the environmental protection. Instead of trying to help people in those industries whose jobs have been outsourced, either by technology or by migrating to other countries, he's cut essential funding retraining programs. He's cut Labor Department funding for job training. But Trump's broken promise that most hurts my constituents here in the Washington area is his failure to offer a comprehensive infrastructure bill. He promised to launch a new infrastructure bill in the first couple of weeks. $1 trillion was his campaign promise, but we have seen nothing. And maybe he's too busy watching cable TV or tweeting or playing golf or enriching himself at taxpayer expense to put together a real infrastructure bill. But I know that Memorial Bridge is falling down. And there are many, many Virginians and Washingtonians who won't be able to use it unless we fund infrastructure. Every one of us suffers from the metro problems day in and day out, a $300 million shortfall, what could greatly be helped by a real infrastructure bill. So instead, Trump's proposed huge cuts for the Department of Transportation. Well, look, we'd appreciate it if Donald Trump would start to keep his promises and get to work creating jobs to the American people and rebuilding our badly needed infrastructure. I'd now like to introduce the distinguished senator from Wisconsin, Ms. Baldwin.
Thank you. Well, I hail from Wisconsin, and in Wisconsin, we have a long and proud tradition of making things. We make paper, engines, tools, ships, and that's what we do, and we do it well. I've made it a top priority of mine to support our Made in Wisconsin manufacturing economy. President Trump has made promises to change our economic and trade policies to help workers who are struggling to get ahead. I share this goal, but it has become clear to me that we must hold Mr. Trump accountable so that he keeps his promises to Wisconsin's working class. Last July, I introduced Buy America legislation that would help rebuild America's crumbling drinking water infrastructure with American-made iron and steel. Last September, my Buy America standard passed the Senate with broad bipartisan support on a 95-3 vote. However, in December, Speaker Paul Ryan and the Republican House leadership stripped it from the final water infrastructure bill. I introduced an amendment along with Senator Casey and Senator Brown to restore my Buy America reform, and I demanded a vote. Majority Leader McConnell blocked this simple request to consider the amendment and obstructed a vote in the Senate. Despite this obstruction from Speaker Ryan and Majority Leader McConnell, I haven't given up because our workers deserve to have their work rewarded with a strong Buy America standard. I recently introduced my Buy American legislation at Neenah Foundry. Neenah Foundry is a Wisconsin manufacturer that helps every day rebuild our nation's water infrastructure. President Trump has talked a lot about his plan to buy American and hire American. I support that position, and I am pleased that he came to Wisconsin last week to focus on a priority of mine. I'm also pleased that he came to Wisconsin and said that he supported my legislation and that he agrees with me 100%. But those words of support are not enough to get the job done. Now that President Trump has expressed his support for my Buy American reform, I'm hoping that he will join me in pushing Majority Leader McConnell and Speaker Ryan on legislative action and follow through. The time is now for President Trump to exercise leadership on this issue so that he can keep his promise to the workers of my state and the workers of the United States. Today, I'm sending a letter to Leader McConnell and EPW Committee Chairman Barrasso, calling on them to act on my Buy America legislation. The choice for the Republican establishment in Washington is clear. Do you stand with American manufacturers and workers, or do you support spending taxpayer dollars on Chinese and Russian steel for American water infrastructure projects? For us, the choice is clear. We stand with American manufacturers and workers. Now, let's get together on Buy America, and let's get the job done for them. Let's take legislative action and hold President Trump accountable to the promises that he has made to American and Wisconsin workers. I think now we'll open for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Senator Baldwin. Let me just stress again that each of us has been working on these issues and is committed to these issues for years and have made changes to move us forward, to make things and grow things and invent and build. We, looking at this president, had been hopeful that he would work with us on these bills and others to take the next step to get things done. And it's almost 100 days, and we're still waiting. Happy to take questions. Yes. Hi.
You're in the Finance Committee.
Yes.
What is your view of a proposed 15% corporate rate, and could it pass the Senate, do you think?
The devil's in the details. If they're only talking about the corporate rate and not helping small business, I think that would certainly for me be a non-starter because small businesses are so important. Depends on the rest of the structure. So again, it's nice to have an idea. Ideas aren't enough. You have to put it in legislative language. You have to talk with people. We on the Finance Committee traditionally work in a bipartisan manner. Last year, we had proposals to move forward on international tax reform, but the majority chose not to act on those. So I'm ready to act, but we've got to see the details, and it's got to be something that's fair for small businesses as well as large, and for working people.
So if it is mixed, I know there's a lot of details, but it doesn't sound like you have a rejectionist attitude toward a number like 15 if it's mixed with a lot of other.
I'm very skeptical. I've seen no plan in the past that could get to that level without seriously adding to the deficit or undermining those things that are important for working people. But certainly, I want to see the details and have a lot of questions.
Senator, I want to
Yes.
ask you about
And
next
please
steps.
feel
You
free.
talked about the end of your remarks. Certainly, there's something in these first 100 days that you've seen from the Trump administration where you guys can find a compromise on to actually, advance legislation or your priorities. What is something that you guys can work on in the future?
Well, we started right out in January when this president said, I want to rebuild America. We said, that sounds great. Roads, bridges, water sewer systems, electric grid, broadband. There's no question we could create jobs for workers, for small businesses. We can rebuild America. We put forward a proposal in the Senate that matched the number that the president had proposed. We've yet to hear back. So we are still open to that. Each of my colleagues have legislation, and Senator Baldwin talked about the president being in Wisconsin and indicating that he supported her bill, and we're ready to go.
So has there been any level of dialogue between the Trump administration?
Well, I can tell you only for myself, when I was interviewing the new Secretary of Treasury, I brought forward my Bring Jobs Home Act, which closes the loophole that requires American taxpayers to pay for the move, actually literally pay for the move, and workers to pay for the move when they're losing their jobs. And they said it sounded like a good idea. This is something I have been putting forward since I think 2005. It's been twice voted on the Senate with Republicans blocking it from moving forward. So my hope was with a new Republican president, he could go to the Republicans in the House and Senate and say, let's get it done. I had those conversations in January and am yet to hear back from the administration, but am still certainly very open to getting it done. I don't know if other colleagues want to respond as well.
You know, I've been a broken record on Buy America, and I've had the chance to very briefly speak directly with the president on the bill that I referred to, but also as he brought forth his nominees for various cabinet posts. This was an important topic of conversation with many of them, with Wilbur Ross, with Elaine Chao. In particular, with Elaine Chao, I will say that she had written in opposition to Buy American policies in her past work, and I asked her on the record during her confirmation hearing, now that you're about to join the Trump administration, if confirmed, how will you stand on Buy American provisions, particularly with the subject matter that will be under your jurisdiction, transportation? And she said very clearly that Buy American would be her focus because of President Trump's position. But it's been extremely frustrating on this. I didn't mention it in my earlier remarks, but the day that Paul Ryan and the House Republicans stripped the Buy American provisions that I authored from the WRDA bill, it was the day after Trump's victory tour in Cincinnati, where he said 2 principles will guide my infrastructure, Buy America and Hire American. And we have not seen the follow-through. He did not utter a peep or a tweet when the following day Paul Ryan and the House Republicans stripped this provision. And he has not followed through his words with actions, and we stand ready.
Yeah, I just add one thing. You know, there are a number of bills in the House that relate to infrastructure. We have, the Make It in America agenda, which is really central to our economic agenda for the House Democrats. And I think many of us heard a lot of the rhetoric of the president during his campaign and thought, this is an area we can work on together. But what we've seen is a lot of discussion of those issues, a lot of use of them in political rallies, but very little, if any, execution of those policies by way of legislation or actual working with Democrats to move it forward. And so the purpose of today is to really say, to the president, if you mean what you say, there are lots of ways you can work to strengthen American manufacturing, create jobs. You don't have to do a lot of work. We already have the bills in the House and the Senate that will achieve those objectives. My colleagues and I have been working on these for many, many years, but you have to really mean it. And I think what we're seeing instead from this administration is a focus on issues that they think are politically popular with their base and not a focus on helping to create good-paying jobs, particularly in the manufacturing sector, or rebuilding the infrastructure of our country. We're ready, willing, and able to work to get those things done, and there's lots of good plans to do it. We need a president who's serious about it, who's willing to work in partnership with us to actually make those things happen.
We're told one more question, so yes.
A question on the tax framework expected to come out tomorrow. It is expected to discuss an infrastructure package using repatriation revenue, which is something Democratic leaders have supported in the past. Are you open to discussing that this time around as part of it?
I think, personally for me, I'm open to discussing any ideas that actually create jobs and a more effective competitive tax system. So, and I'm sure that's true of other colleagues as well. It is very much about the devil in the details, though. This is not about just throwing out ideas or photo ops. This is not a reality TV show. This is reality, and people need good-paying jobs. And we're willing to work with this president if he's serious about making that happen. Thanks very much.